Hello and welcome. This is session 4 of the walkthrough for Night of the Sun, 5e adventure module that you may have picked up on Kickstarter, or perhaps you picked it up on one of the local PDF sellers. Either way, I'm glad you're here. I'm the Mad Hermit, and I'm going to be your host through this little walkthrough. I'm going to give you some details on how to run this module, or how to approach it anyway, and places you might be able to make some adjustments. This is primarily a podcast for dungeon masters who are going to be running this module, and so that means if you are one of the devilish little players lurking in the background who ought not be here, now's your time to flee. Honestly, there's going to be spoilers and spoilers upon spoilers, so if you want to play this game with the best sort of first run take on it, let everything kind of speak to you out of your DM's take on the module, you're going to want to dive out right about now. All right, so this is session 4, as I was saying, and at this point we have covered a lot of background details about the village of Dawn's Hollow, where this module begins, and we even had gotten so far as to get our party up to the inn, but honestly we're going to backtrack just a bit more now and talk about approaching the inn itself. When your party of players, either from the good side of the coin or the bad side of the coin, first approach the Cutter Cup Inn and Tavern. It's the largest building in the village, constructed of logs, and it has roughly 3 levels. Now, we detail the 2 most important levels, and then there's also a basement, and there's also half of the 3rd floor is the residence of the people who own it. So while there are 3 levels, we haven't mapped out in the module the owner's residence or the basement. The basement's just sort of a generally wide open area that anyone can move through, so it doesn't need a whole lot of description. We detail what can be found down there. But in the owner's home at the top of the building, that we don't detail either. There's no real reason to be in there. There's nothing much that can be found up there. Maybe whatever little savings the owner of the inn and his wife have managed to kind of tuck away from themselves, but we haven't mapped it. The GM could just make a quick little floor plan, a few rooms up there, not much. The 3rd floor portion of the inn only spans half of the building, so it's not going to be a whole lot of space that you have to cover. Now, as the party is walking up the steps toward the front doors of the inn, there's going to be a kid on the inn working with a broom, cleaning off the long porch on the front of the inn. He's a big kid, about 6'3", kind of heavy set, and he will smile at the party. He's sweeping, but mostly he's staring off into the darkness. And as he watches the party approach, he's going to seem nervous, like he wants to approach them, but he's shy and he doesn't really know how to. He's going to be very awkward about this. This character's name is Billy Artro, and he's kind of we don't do very well in the inn describing why we put him in here at all. Now, Billy Artro's younger sister Gretchen is one of the people that's gone missing in this village. Your players are going to find that out when they go in and talk to the mayor here in just a little bit. Billy is very hurt by the fact that his younger sister has disappeared, and he just finds himself staring off into the darkness, sort of looking for her. Now, Billy is slow-witted. I don't know how else to describe it other than that. He has a bad stutter. He's very nervous, and they hire him here in the inn just to basically push a broom around, help with things here and there. He's a big kid, so he's kind of strong, and he can help them move kegs of ale and stuff when they need to do that. But mostly they like having him around because he's a sweet kid. He wants to approach the party as they're approaching the inn because he wants to ask them if they have seen his little sister Gretchen. He's very shy, so he's not going to approach the party unless they give him any opening at all. So as the GM, you're going to want to describe this kind of awkward kid. He's kind of shuffling around. He's obviously wanting to approach the people. If one of your party members, one of the players, takes pity on Billy and sort of gives him an opening or approaches, Billy is going to, come forward. He's not going to fly forward, but he'll stumble forward a little bit and stutter out that he's looking for Sister Gretchen, and have you seen her? And he's obviously slow-witted. He's obviously a sweet kid. And We have this here because this village is going to be suffering from undead incursions. Now, we don't detail at any point in the module where Gretchen is or what has happened with her. Now, as the GM, however, you may want to include young Miss Gretchen as one of the undead that ends up stalking into the village in the course of the incursions that are going to happen over the next couple of nights. When that happens, of course, we have this character Billy, her older brother, who is going to be delighted to see her and not confused by the entire situation and the fear and the panic of the village. He's not really going to be able to put together the fact that, there's a big problem. He's just going to see his sister. He's just going to run for her. And that's why Billy's here. That's why this situation is here, because we want to create a tension that your players can play off of. And while it's a cruel tension, of course, this isn't real life. This is a story, and we want to generate the kind of tensions that will lead to a good story interaction. If Billy can't be held back and rushes outside to get to his sister, somebody may have to save him. This is going to create a heck of a tension for especially a party going through this if they're the evil side of the coin party. And we want Billy to be sympathetic enough that he's going to pull on the heartstrings of the characters and that they are going to be driven to try to save him. It's going to up the tensions when that happens, and it's going to create a nice sizzle that you need to get the emotions running and to get these characters put into the kind of tense situations that you're going to want them to be in. So take a moment to describe Billy as the party is approaching the end. Maybe your party wants nothing to do with him, could care less. Maybe your evil characters make fun of him and push on past. Maybe your good players take a great interest in him, or maybe one of your evil characters is just pretending to take a great interest in him, but however they want to play it off, I guarantee you the player will be taking an actual sympathetic interest, which is going to create an actual tension later when Gretchen does show back up, and it's not a good situation. So that's why Billy is here, and that's why we mentioned him in the module, and I wish we'd have gone a little bit further in detailing how it was we wanted to use him. So I hope that helps you with him, and I think if you wait to play that card at the right moment, you're going to be able to generate a pretty tense situation with him. So your party has reached the inn, and they get into the inn in the main downstairs area. The maps for these are on page 29 in the book. I'm not quite sure what page that is in the PDF. I don't happen to be looking at it right here while I'm going through this. Somewhere around 29, I guess, if you're using the PDF. The main tavern area is basically the entire, what would this be? It would be the entire western side of the inn, the western half of the inn. There's a kitchen in what would be the southeastern, is that correct? I'm looking at this upside down. I'd have to turn it around to get the right direction sense of this. Yeah, the southeastern corner. There's a private dining room sort of in the central eastern side of the inn, and then there's a library, like a private reading room. It's got some old books and stuff in it that's tucked away in the, I guess that would be the northeastern corner, but you have to move through the hallway between the kitchens and the private dining room to get into that room. So the other main feature of the inn would be the fireplace in the, I guess that would be the northwestern corner, and the bar, which spans the kind of a crooked shape of bar that is in the southeastern side. In between them is a stairway that leads up to the rooms of the inn on the second floor. There's a flop room up there and several private guest rooms and a bathroom, but we've already discussed outhouses, so it's literally a bathing room. It's a room with two big bathtubs. In the kitchen, they can heat up water and lift that water up through a dumbwaiter into the that bathing room and fill up a tub for you. So the party has a chance to purchase a bath if they'd like, and that'll be offered to them. Once they've gotten into the inn, they're going to find that the other patrons here are all along the bar, and they're having a dark discussion. The barkeep is a busty, happy-looking woman, and she will notice, everyone in here is going to notice the party when they come in, and especially if you have any outstanding sort of character races amongst the party. Those people are going to draw eyes, things are going to get quiet, and there's going to be an awkward moment of staring. Now, Behind the bar is Mindra. This is an NPC we discussed in the last session of the podcast, and hopefully you heard that section, so already you're thinking that Mindra's like, wahaha, but she's not. Mindra's going to smile sweetly. At this point, nobody knows anything about Mindra. She's a happy woman, and she sees the awkward situation, and she's going to step in and take control of the situation. She's in charge of this inn while her husband's in helping the cook at his duties. So this is her space, and seeing that the characters are in an awkward situation, she's going to come to their rescue and, say, hey, welcome to the tavern. Welcome to the Cutter Cut Inn. Please take any table that you see that you like. Since you're new here, first drink is on the house. And then she's going to, come out as the characters move to a table and set themselves up. Now, the people at the bar, they're going to, once Mindra has broken this ice, they're going to go kind of back to minding their own business, talking quietly amongst themselves, maybe gazing over occasionally at the group of adventurers that have just walked in. There's the only thing kind of outstanding at that tavern is going to be there's an old man at the very end of the bar. I meant bar, not tavern. Sorry about that. But there's one old man kind of separated out from the rest. He's there with them, but he's in his own space at the end of the bar. The other patrons aren't exactly ignoring him or avoiding him, but they are definitely giving him his space. They obviously know the man, but they're giving, he's got a little padded area around him, basically a padded aura area around him, because he is just staring into his cups and drinking them and maybe occasionally mumbling to himself, and he doesn't so much as lift an eye to look at the party. And it's that little piece alone that might be interesting. If you have any rogues or characters in the party that would have a high intellect or a high perception score, also if they have that mixed with a high charisma score, give those characters a chance to notice this. It's not that they're noticing someone staring at them or someone, evil eyeing them from the bar. They're actually noticing the one person in this bar that could not care less about the presence of the party. He has no interest. He has no desire to look up. He is just in his own world. If anybody notices him, he's just an anomaly that they might want to take note of. Now, once they are seated, Mindra will come to the bar and she will, make a little bit of small talk. Where did you travel from? Good thing you made it here before dark. What are you doing in town? And what can I get you to drink? She's not looking for a full conversation. As a matter of fact, Mindra will avoid a full conversation at this point. And if the party starts to ask her anything like, what this village is a little weird, nobody's out and about, what's going on? She's just going to, village, you picked kind of a rough time to come. The village is suffering a hard time right now. We've had a bad few weeks, that's all. It's nothing for you to concern yourselves about. Let me get you some drinks. You've had enough stresses with obviously a long day of travel. Let me bring you some drinks. You relax. We can get some food coming pretty quick. And every time they kind of press her in that same direction, it's pretty much the same answer she's gonna give them. In the book, we go over a list of the possible things that she might be asked about. One of them might be Billy from the front porch. Hey, we just talked to look like a kid that works here out on the front porch. He seemed pretty sad, said his sister was missing. Again, Mindra's just going to she's not going to automatically shut that down, but she's going to half-ass her answer. She's going to be like, yeah, like I said, we've had some bad times here. It's been a rough few weeks, and you know what? But not something for you to concern yourselves about. Don't worry about it. Let me get those drinks. And she's just going to keep pushing back to the main focus of taking an order, going to get the drinks for the people. We have a menu in the books and in the PDF for all the stuff that's available here, including the prices of the rooms, prices of the baths, all of that. Now, Mindra's going to head back to the bar to get the drinks, and as she does, she's going to go into the kitchen first, and she's going to step in there. She's going to nod to her husband, who's in there probably cleaning dishes or something, and tell him, we have a table full of guests, so you should come see them. And so about the time Mindra's starting to pour the first drink or so out from the kitchens is going to come a kind of tall, bald, broad-shouldered guy with a pot belly, wearing a red apron. And this is not only the owner of the tavern and Mindra's husband, Lenny, but he's also the local mayor. And he has sent off some letters in the recent past to try to reach the local lord that rules over this region. and he's anxious to hear back and is hoping that that local lord will have sent help. So his first impression is that the party may be the help coming from the local lord. Now, depending on the hook you're using to get your party into this adventure to begin with, they may be the help that has been sent from Lord Lonsdale, or they aren't. Either way, doesn't matter. The mayor's going to think they are, and he's going to come up to them, wiping his hands on his apron, and introduce himself as Mayor Lenny Tinston. And he is he's anxiously waiting, like he's looking at them as if they should be saying something to him. He's going to ask them just kind of flat out, are you here from Lord Lonsdale? And if the party says no, he's just going to visibly kind of slump. If the party says yes, he's going to slump again, only this time in relief. Either way, one way or another, he's going to leave enough of a situation that the parties engage him in any contact at all. At first he's going to try to be like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were someone else." If they're not the agents of the local lord, and he might just be like, "Oh, I was hoping you were these people I'd sent away for some help." And if the party happens to be like, "Well, what do you need help with?" And Lenny's frustrated enough at this point. He's had a rough few weeks that he might just take the party up on letting them know all about it. He's going to say, "You picked a bad time to visit, friends. All hell's been breaking loose in our little village here. Last 3 weeks been about the worst weeks of my life. I don't even know what to do anymore," he's going to say. And he's just going to shrug. And if the parties, if your players just are like, "Sit down, let us know about it," anything like that, he's going to take them up on it. And he's going to, maybe with a last look over at his wife, make sure she isn't frowning at him, he's going to just go ahead and flop down in a chair right there. Brush his hair. He has no hair. He has a beard. He's bald as they come. He's just going to kind of wipe his forehead and sigh and be like, I don't even know where to begin. And what is going to begin here is a conversation with the mayor. And this is one of the things that there are a couple of drops of information that need to happen in the course of the adventure so that your party can get the proper background and kind of understand what's going on in the village and what has been going on in the village. And this first conversation with the mayor is going to be their shot at kind of getting their first glimpse into really what's happening here. So we go over in the module and in the PDF, I guess they're both a module. I'm just going to start calling that the module, and I mean both. I'll let you know when I'm talking about something that's different between the two. We go over, I think, 8 points of a conversation that Lenny needs to have with the players. These are the 8 main events that have happened in the past 3 weeks, and this is a couple 3 pages of information. Now, we discussed this in the module that this isn't meant to be just a straight read through. You could do that. You could just read through each of these points if you wanted to. Obviously, the better way to engage your players with this is as a role-playing session. You're going to want to set up a situation where these kind of come up a little more organically. The mayor isn't quite sure where to begin. He's going to say, probably the first thing that's pressing on him is the fact that he has an execution in the morning. We're having an execution in the morning. That's just one of the things that's gone on. He may start there. He may tell the story of how the local priest was killed a few days ago, was murdered. That they found a madman out behind the church while they were digging the grave for the priest. That the villagers all think the madman did it and may have done some of the other things that have happened in the last couple of weeks before this. For instance, a few people have gone missing. The local Tanner Skinner, and Hunter went out hunting one morning, never came back. That was about 3 weeks ago. There's Gretchen Artrow, the little sister of Billy that was encountered on the porch. She disappeared about 2 weeks ago. She never came home one day after going out to play, and the villagers took the hit of that news pretty hard. The Hunter Tanner guy that went missing, things happen. There are monsters out in this fantasy world of ours, and a hunter out in out in the hill lands is occasionally going to run across something, and he may not come home. That's understandable, but Gretchen's disappearance has hit the village a lot harder than that. That's the first sort of big impact that the villagers take. They spend days searching the hills, almost the entire village coming out to help look for this little girl, and they can't find her anywhere. He might talk about the thorn bushes. About the first thing that happened was 3 weeks ago, these wild thorn rumors began circulating around the village of wild thorn bushes growing up out of control over the old battlefield hill, about 5 miles north of the town. They call it Bone Dust Hill because of all the dead bodies that are around it and all the bones that are exposed after a heavy rain. It's an old battle site. Famous battle took place there, and come to think of it, it happened 300 years ago, but I think there's a book about that battle. It's somewhere in our library. I don't know. Lenny knows he has a book that details the history of that event, but that's really the least thing concerning him. What he's more interested in is the fact that just before all this craziness started, he started hearing rumors about the thorn bushes on that hill growing out of control, growing maybe 20, 30 feet tall in some cases. He was hearing some of the, farmsteaders out and around the hills that had come in to have a drink at the local tavern, telling these stories of seeing all these kind of crazy thorn bushes. He had even intended to take a trek out there. It's only 5 miles north of town, to take a look at these himself, but he hadn't, gotten out there. There's a shrine on top of that hill that was built, long ago to honor all the dead humans, elves, and dwarves that fought in this battle against a horde of orc that had come out of the northern mountains. And supposedly these thorns are growing all around that shrine. But then people started going missing, so of course he got distracted. One of the other events that shook him up is that one of the locals, matter of fact, the old man sitting at the end of the bar there, came in a couple of weeks ago. The old man, notably, that hadn't looked at the PCs, shaken up, talking about an entire family being murdered at one of the local farmsteads out and about. So the old man's name at the barn is Vernrad Cadwell, and he stumbled upon the remains of the Yinul family, which had been Ma and Pa Yinul and their 2 hulking, beef-fed children, boys, all of them killed. And he wouldn't talk much about it, and he wanted the mayor to come look right then. And so the mayor, dropped what he was doing, and him and Vernrad went back out to that old farmstead, and I guess they took the priest with them too, Father Chandley. And what they found there disturbed the mayor quite deeply. What they ran across was a ritual murder of this entire family. And it's not a family that would have been easy to take down. The Pa Yinul was definitely a hard man. Ma Yinul was known to be something of a draft horse herself and never shirked from a fight at any point in her life. And their children, they spent most of their time beating each other up and were big bruisers, and it wouldn't have been easy to take down any of these people. All of them were murdered rather garishly, ritually slain. Now the mayor will kind of avoid trying to talk about the worst parts of this, but if your PCs push him on this, what he saw at the farmstead, he's going to describe this ritual kill site, salt circles around the bodies and strange sigils marked on the bodies and on the walls. He's going to talk about the priest coming in and trying to bless the bodies, and basically talking about the evil that he felt in this room, and also taking out borrowing a dagger from Vernrad to cut. There were already cuts in the stomachs of the dead there at the ritual site, and the father used the dagger to pry open a cut in the bellies on these people and pull out a rabbit's foot. The rabbit's foot had been wrapped in, I don't know if it's wrapped in lead or silver or something like that. Anyway, sort of a ritually decorated rabbit's foot that had been, their bellies had been sliced open and this thing had been inserted into the bodies. The priest took care to remove that from each of the bodies, and then destroyed the evil sigils that they had seen around the farmhouse, buried the bodies and blessed them, and burned down the farmhouse to get rid of the evil that they had found there. Then they all three came back to town, promising not to discuss what they had seen there with too many people so that they didn't frighten the entire village. They, admitted that, yes, the family had been killed, but the mayor, Father Chandley from the chapel, and old man Vernrad had just kept their tongues mostly about what happened. Now, once the mayor gets to that little point of his story, there's some checks that your players can make. If your players are on the evil side of the coin and they ask to see the sigils, the mayor will be able to show them the sigils. And these are the primary sigil that he can draw out from memory is in the book. If you have the Kickstarter book, it'd be found on page 125. It's a sort of horned and crowned sigil of sort of a ghostly looking face. That sigil was on the bodies, on the walls, and the evil, if you're playing through this adventure with characters from the evil side of the coin, they will recognize that sigil very plainly as having been the sigil of the cult of Orcus. Now, other characters might also be able to come up with this interpretation, but it's going to be a little tougher for them. They'll have to pass religion checks, probably DC 15 or 16, to recognize the mark as a cult specifically belonging to the cult of Orcus. As a matter of fact, they may have to even pass that check by a few points before they can see it. We give a detailed kind of breakdown of how you would want to run that check in amongst these notes on the conversation. It's probably important to cover just a couple other details about the sigils and the markings of Orcus, at least for the characters that would be undertaking the adventure from the dark side. Necromancers serving the demon lord Orcus are going to use sigils that are associated with him, obviously, like the main one that we provide in the book here that is just sort of a symbol of Orcus. But the necromancers are also going to sign their work. They leave smaller emblems, smaller slash marks, things like that, sort of trailing off or tailing off at the end of some of these sigil markings. As a matter of fact, they might have a whole list of these. It could be 2, 3, 4 different little emblems that they might embed into any specific sigil they make. Those sigils generally are their own signature, possibly the signature of their faction of the cult, and then possibly the sigil of their own master. It's sort of a calling card, and it's a way to advertise, and it's a way to strike fear in their enemies that know those things, and it's also a way to sort of declare ownership, possession of the kills or whatever the ritual space. They're letting it be known, I, Necromancer Altheron, have performed this act. Here is my mark, see it and weep. Sort of something like that, along those lines. So there's a lot more detail involved in the sigils, and your evil characters are going to know that. From memory, Mayor Tilston is only going to be able to come up with the basic form of this sigil. He's not going to remember any weird little wonky, sigils and weird little marks that were attached to the end of this branch or this horn or anything like that. Stuff that cultists of Orcus would have already been trained in and know to see at sight. Remember that while this conversation is going on, there's going to be other activity in the inn. The longer it takes for the conversation to play out, the more that's going to happen. There's going to be some villagers that come in and out. Maybe a couple of dwarves come in, take a table, get some drinks. Might be an older woman who comes in the company of Billy and sits down at a table. Billy's still sad and depressed, and she sits and talks with him. Possibly the cook or Mindra brings out food to that table, pats Billy on the shoulder or something like this. Might be a halfling woman that comes in and that Mindra takes the time to sort of cajole into singing. She might hop up in front of the fireplace or on one of the tables and sing a sort of somber, soft, nice little song in the background. These are just things you might want to throw in, add in the course of the conversation. While this is going on, at some point, Mindra is going to come over and drop off drinks at the table. The mayor's going to raise or lower his voice depending on who he's worried is going to hear the things that he's saying. Talking about Father Chandley is going to remind him that Father Chandley was murdered just a few days before apparently by this madman who the villagers tend to believe probably killed the child, probably killed the hunter that have gone missing, and may have killed the entire Yinul family. It's here where the mayor's going to break with the villagers. He is not inclined to believe that the madman may have done any of these things. First of all, the madman was half-dressed, naked, crazy person, and there wasn't any blood on him that the mayor could make out. Mostly there was dried crap and just stains of muck and mud all over him. There was no blood that he could make out. So, and besides that, it wouldn't have been easy for this one scrawny little, crazy person to have taken down the entire Yinul family, let alone have done it in a ritual manner. So none of that's going to add up for the mayor, and he doesn't believe that the madman, who they do not know is named Silas, by the way. They can't even get any information out of him. We know he's Silas because I described him in the last session of this podcast, but the mayor doesn't know this. They don't know his name. The guy just says weird things to them. None of it makes much sense. They think he's just completely insane, but nonetheless, the father is killed or is dead, and they did find other signs of ritual abuse on the good father as well, although that has not been advertised around the village either. And as a matter of fact, the mayor wasn't able to get a good look at it because by the time the acolytes told the mayor, which was just an hour or two after they found the body, the acolytes had cleaned up all of the marks, and they had wrapped the father in a burial shroud. And the young woman now in charge of the chapel, who is kind of large and in charge of anything that she ends up in charge of, she would not allow for any desecration of the body. The mayor didn't think there was any way he could really check the body for further marks or anything, so he left well enough alone. He went out with one of the acolytes into the graveyard to help dig the grave, and there they discovered the madman out lurking around the tombstones in the graveyard. After that whole mess was accomplished, the mayor stumbled back into the tavern and he kind of forgot about the fact that there had been ritual markings in the chapel, and he hadn't seen them anyway because the acolytes had worked diligently to clean up all of those marks. Once again, if you have any clerics in the party or any spellcasters, you might want to give them an Arcana check with a pretty high DC, 15, 16, something like that, to know that simply cleaning up the marks of a ritual killing do not necessarily mean that there's been any disruption of the spells that may have been cast in conjunction with that ritual. So cleaning it up just isn't quite enough. Now, it's possible the acolytes didn't know that, but it might be possible that some of your player characters will. So you want to look for openings for them to be able to kind of reach in and understand that sort of thing. Other odd occurrences that have happened in the village, aside from what we've already mentioned, is that 4 days ago, right in the middle of all the chaos, before, as a matter of fact, the night before the father was found murdered, there was a group of Wood Elves who came into the village. They came to the inn. The locals were not happy to see them. Locals in this region of the hills, they have a beef with the Wood Elves. They kind of consider them to be effete, snobby, and dangerous. And they're none of these hill dwellers are allowed into the Wood Elf forest. It's about a week to the east of where you're at, and they don't like to see the Wood Elves just traipsing in amongst their hills either. Anything that goes wrong in the village typically gets blamed on the Wood Elves, whether at any other time of the year. So right now, with the current sort of terrible occurrences happening over the last few weeks, people were already kind of grimly mumbling about the Wood Elves possibly being behind it, and here a whole troop of them showed up. They were under the leadership of an elven woman named Jayara, and they stayed in the inn overnight. They kept to themselves mostly, but they did ask a lot of questions about the shrine and the battlefield, and apparently they were headed there. She also, before she left, pulled Mayor Tilston aside and asked him to describe the people that had gone missing, because she and her claiming that she and the elves would look for those people while they were out. Now, that was 4 days ago. That same day, they found Father Chandley's body, so just after the elves had left. As a matter of fact, a mob had shown up at the tavern that morning, and the mob wanted the elves, but the elves had already left, so the mayor had to kind of talk them down. The mob, for a moment, thought it was going to go out and chase the elves through the hill land, run them off their land, but
The mayor managed to talk him out of that, and then they found the body of Father Chandley, or news broke of Father Chandley, and all hell broke loose. It wasn't long after that they caught the madman in the graveyard. So the already completely panicked and upset village, it was all the mayor could do to hold them off from just murdering the madman right there on the spot. Other than that, the things that have been kind of going on is that there have been rumors of people seeing strange men wandering in the hills around the village. People are claiming that some of them are claiming to have seen an ogre wandering in the hills around the village. Some are claiming to have seen an ogre in company of men wandering around the village. Now, the players, if you use the alternative opening where they have already also encountered an ogre, may have helped or slain an ogre just outside of town. Slaying that ogre will be greeted as good news in the tavern, might even be worth a round of drinks from one of the locals if they happen to overhear this. But if your party has befriended that ogre and is trying to protect him, now is probably a bad time to bring him up. Last thing the mayor is going to be talking about, looking tired and remembering his duties, is that he has because this conversation probably will have rolled on for a while. And if you've done it in complete role-playing style, kind of whether you followed point by point or whether you let the conversation just sort of, bumble around from topic to topic as it went, naturally on its own, by the time it's done, the mayor's going to remember he has an execution to see to in the morning. And they're going to bring down the madman and kill him first light, and he needs to be rested, so he's going to want to be going to get some sleep. Now, your player characters, they're suffering one level of fatigue. They themselves have been traveling all day. They may have been in a battle with some undead and an ogre just outside of town. And nonetheless, it's possible that some of them are going to want to go talk to Silas, the prisoner, before he can be executed in the morning, or at least to look into that. If they choose to do that, they're going to have to do that under the auspices of one level of fatigue and the negatives that will ensue from that. Otherwise, the party is kind of left to their own devices. If they, if they're smart, or if they know maybe it's not the best idea to go try to talk to the prisoner, their characters are tired, they can wait, maybe they can see him in the morning before he's hung, then the rest of the night's kind of open to them. They can explore the inn, they can go outside in the rain, look around, they might catch sight of Silas out there in the flash of lightning somewhere, because at this point, by the time the mayor's done telling this story, the Silas will have changed into a giant rat, which is, it's a giant rat, but it's small enough to squeeze through bars of his cage cell, and he has murdered the constables and escaped from the constables' house. Now, one of the things that is in the book that is not in the module, should your player characters go to the constable's house, they're going to have to kind of explore the house. We have it all detailed out. It's covered in the same section that goes over all the other buildings in the inn. We have maps of it. The cells were in the basement. When they get to the constable's house, they're going to find the door partially open. Nobody's going to answer when the mayor calls to try to bring the constable out. Won't hear anything inside, but once they get inside, they're going to find some muddy tracks or smears of mud along the floor. Not mud, blood along the floor. And those are leading from the open, kind of halfway open door that should lead down into the jail cells, down in the basement. Going down there, the party is going to discover, first of all, it smells terrible. It smells like Silas, so the smell of crap and shit and blood and open guts will be thick in the air, and there will be rats running all over because they're happily, merrily munching on the corpses of the constable, who is a hill dwarf, and the constable's main helper, who's a halfling. Their two bodies are down there on the floor. Their weapons are still there and everything, but they're torn to pieces. Silas wrecked them, ate them a little bit, and then promptly went upstairs. More than this, Silas went to the main floor and then walked right up the stairs to the constable's home, which is on the second floor of this building, where the constable's wife and baby were. Now, this isn't covered in the PDF. It couldn't be, but it is in the book. The wife is found, first of all, there's signs of massive conflict having taken place in this house. The wife fought like a banshee to try to stop this enormous monster from getting in and through the house. Her body, however, will be found still clutching a bloody baby's blanket near a broken-out window on the second floor. No sign of the baby whatsoever. Now, you can ignore this entirely if you don't want to use it. Like Billy, this is another thing put in mostly for tension. It's put in because I feel most GMs and most gaming groups are mature enough to handle this without turning it into some sort of just, blatantly sadistic, vicious, awful thing. It is, but Silas has the baby, and he's going to use that for leverage. He's not got the baby because he's going to eat it necessarily, but he might use it in a pinch to get out of a bad situation. So he may stow it somewhere or hide it, or he may just have it, or maybe he can be encountered at some point in the evening and run off from it. One way or another, though, Silas left that house with the baby, and the party is going to have to, if the GM wishes, now, again, if the GM wishes, you don't have to run it this way. You can have that baby up there untouched in its crib, which is also a good way to go. Silas came in, killed the mom, went out the window, right? The baby's still there crying, and it's a sad sight. In which case, the party might take the baby, take it down to the inn, and it might be, Mayor Tilston is going to just take care of it until he can find someone that will adopt the child, something like that. That's an easy way out of this. But if the GM wants to use this as leverage, if he wants this as another sort of emotional tension point, then he would want the were-rat to have ran off with the baby. He's basically kidnapped the child. He's going to use it for leverage. He's going to use it to try to strong-arm the party into taking actions. And as far as strong-arming the party goes, a baby's a pretty good tactic, especially against a good party. But even an evil party, this is going to press their buttons too. Just because they're evil doesn't mean they're stupid. Saving the baby would put them in good standing within the village, so it's something they would probably want to pursue. Plus, they're evil, but who's evil to babies? Nobody. Well, I guess Silas is, but he's a nut, so that's how that goes. So basically, take that or leave it. Use it if you can use it. Avoid it if it gives you any ill will at all. For instance, for my own, I put that in the book. That doesn't mean that I used it when I ran any of these play tests. As a matter of fact, I avoid it because it's just tough. I have kids, so it's not something I wanted to explore. Yes, it can be a really good lever, but I didn't necessarily need it. I had other levers, so it might be the same for you. It's up to you. There's some rumors that we list that can be gained in the inn once the players get back to the inn. And essentially, they're still tired, so maybe after a bath, after eating a nice meal, after talking to a couple of the other NPCs in the tavern, they may decide that it's time to go to bed. Maybe they're nervous enough that, they catch sight of Silas out in the dark somewhere in a lightning flash or something, so they may, maybe your parties leave a watch up, something like that. All that will work just fine, depending on how you'd like to play it. The first night is just sort of getting their feet wet, learning the litany of woes, I call it, all the things that have gone wrong in the last 3 weeks. Oh, by the way, those 8 things that have gone wrong in the last 3 weeks can either be covered by Mayor Tilston, Lenny Tilston, in the tavern, and that's a good place to do. You can do that with him even if the party has arrived here on the visiting a relative hook. You can also have it, the party arrives, goes to the inn, they get a little bit of the information from Mayor Tilston, maybe, some of it, but he's unwilling to give them kind of everything, and he's tired and doesn't want to talk about all of it. But he does tell them where their relative lives. So they'll probably have to come to the inn to locate their relative within the village. Remember, the party, even if they're here visiting a relative, is not been to this, even the related PC or PCs have not been to this village before, so they'll need to get directions to get to the house. DM will want to look over the village map, pick one of the houses out that isn't detailed already for something else as the house belonging to the relatives of your player character. You want to detail those NPCs out a little bit. Maybe it's, might be his uncle or the character's uncle or her uncle. It might be, I don't know, whoever it is. You want to detail, flesh out that NPC from your own perspective, place them in that house, and they can get the same information that they got from the mayor, only with less detail. The mayor was at the site of the ritually murdered people. He's dealt with the families of the people that have gone missing. He's been active on every search. So was probably the character's relative, because almost everyone in the village was helping search for Gretchen, at least. They can get pretty much the same information from their relative that they could from the mayor, if that's the hook you're using. It's just they won't have the level of detail. They won't have seen the sigils. They may have heard rumors about it being ritual murders, but those rumors will have been crazy and wild by the time the relative heard them, so they won't be practical to reality. It would basically just be enough to send the players back to the mayor to have a more thorough conversation about these topics later, if you wanted it to go that way. Maybe the last note that we need to sort of cover here before I just sort of delve into the village would be the book that Mayor Tilston will mention is in his library, covering the history of the events that took place on Bone Dust Hill. Now, we have a chapter-by-chapter sort of synopsis of this book. It would be Appendix 1 in the module, whatever page that is, depending on whether you have the book or the module, but it's Appendix 1. We've tried to lay it out so that you could photocopy these or print them if you have the PDF, and then just cut out the individual chapters. And if one of your players should happen to go into the library and hunt down this book, they need to make some rolls to try to find it on the shelves. Once they eventually locate it and pull it out, you can give them, if they spend part of that evening reading it, maybe they read through the first chapter or two, you can give them the first couple of the synopses for the book's chapters that they can look through. All this book does is it details the history of what happened there at the battlefield site just outside of town. As the story goes on, as our adventure goes on, most signs are going to continue to point toward that battlefield. It's going to eventually become pretty obvious that whatever's happening is happening at the battlefield, and hopefully your players will, within 4 or 5 days, hopefully before 3 days even, take it upon themselves to head out toward that hill to investigate and see, if maybe the source of all this trouble is out there. Having the book and reading through that is going to, whatever player reads through that, they're going to come up with, they're going to get a few little edges in the course of the dungeons that they will end up going into underneath the shrine on Bone Dust Hill. Reading the book will give them some detailed information about where some main treasure items are, for instance, or at least who they were with. If the characters know that, they might start paying attention to some of the names on some of the sarcophagi down in the tomb, looking for specific ones, because if they find some of these people that are buried there, they're also going to find these magic items that are mentioned in the appendix of that book. They're also going to get a couple of clues about a couple of other things that are going to come in handy in the course of the dungeon. The book is not absolutely necessary to reach the dungeons and get through the dungeons. Clues that will lead to how to get into the dungeon are located around the village and other areas. Clues about how to open the secret passageways that are in the dungeon, a couple of the secret passageways at least. Those clues can be figured out from other sources other than the book, I think. Yes, they can. They can be found in other places. But the book is going to help detail some of those a little more specifically. It's also going to give them some names that they want to pay attention to, particularly the name of the paladin that this necromancer is searching for. And it should give them a very serious hint as to why Belshazzar is hunting for this particular paladin. The characters playing from the evil side of the coin, they may have a little bit of an advantage in this particular thing, because when they read through the book, they might spot out the fact of what was going on with this paladin just prior to his death, the things that he did and said that make this paladin a sort of specific candidate for a particular type of undead called a Death Knight. Because of the way he died and how he died and what he said and what he did just before he died, any necromancers in your party, any cultists of Orcus, they might be able to put it together. That's why they've sent this apprentice here. He's trying to dig up this paladin because he wants to try to change him into a death knight. That can only really be discerned by reading the book, and even there it's going to have to take a couple of checks probably for even a necromancer in the cult of Orcus to kind of put that together. If you got a very clever player or a wizard from that's on the good side of the coin, they may also start to put that together. Like, oh, this guy, there were some problems with this paladin. It's obvious that maybe there's an issue here. There's also some mentions of that knight's son, who is also buried in the tomb, and some details about him that will allow the party to identify that particular his son when they encounter him as a ghost in the tomb. So there are some details in the book that can give some advantage to the players should they find it, and it's not necessarily needed. So if your players don't go after it, that's fine. If they go after it but they don't pay attention, they don't read the little handouts you give them, that's fine too. But if they do, they're going to gain advantages from it. So I think that almost gets us about where we need to be. Basically, you need to get them acquainted, get their feet wet in the village, get a little description of the village going on. You want to set up the general rubric under which the first third of our adventure is going to take place. And it's going to take place in the village, and we can expand it or contract it about as far as we want. We can have the adventure take place here for another 2 or 3 days if we would like. Just depends on how the GM wants to work with the speed and movement of his game, how he wants to progress, how he or she wants to progress the game forward. So we're just setting the stage on this first night. The characters are going to go to sleep, or they're going to, at least rest in their room. There isn't going to be really any intrusions at this point. Silas is probably aware of them by now, especially if they went to the constable's shack or they left the inn at all. He will have seen them, and it will have perked his interest, and he will already be spying on them in terms of he'll be up on the roof of that inn. He'll be listening at their windows. He has excellent hearing. He's going to be paying very close attention to them, trying to decide how much of a threat they are. However, he's not going to just take it upon himself to attack them, probably not on this first night. When things are really going to kick into gear, however, is in the morning. If your players do manage to go to sleep, lock their private room or whatever rooms they've taken in the inn, they fall asleep. If you can get them all to go to bed, great. They all bed down, be a good point to close your game. They're going to wake suddenly before light on the next morning to the sound of a ding, 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 of a rapidly ringing church bell. This church bell, it can be heard for about 2 miles around the village, and it is being rang by a crazy person as fast as they can ring this big old heavy bell. Looking out their window into the storm outside, the sun still hasn't come up. Gray skies thicken overhead, so it's still dark. They're going to be able to make out through the smeary windows a torch kind of bopping along toward the middle of the village, being held aloft by a woman in monk's robes. Sort of a thin woman. She's going to be calling out to people, and people are going to be coming out and talking to her from their homes. She's going to be directing them toward the church. It can't be made out what she's saying through the windows and at the distance, but the party's going to see this. They're also going to hear some activity downstairs. By the time they've all kind of gotten ready and dressed, they're going to head for downstairs. And as they come down there, they're already going to find that there's quite a few people in the inn, rain-soaked, some with crying kids. The different tables kind of packed in around, some of them arguing, little knots of people around the room. It's not really crowded, but there's quite a few people in here. Again, strangers appearing at the head of at the top of the stairs in the inn amongst all these villagers. Things are going to quiet down instantly, and there's going to be a lot of eyes that pin on the characters. Something has happened around the village, and it has scared the villagers, and it's not simply the fact that Silas has escaped, though that may be known by this point. If word of that has gotten around already, then it's going to add to the panic, but something worse has happened. And it's in the next section of this podcast that we'll go over exactly what that is, and we'll start day 2. Day 2 is where we hit kind of a peak of the panic going on, and where the walls are going to kind of rush in to confine our PCs into the village and the villagers into the village, and the undead incursions are going to begin. So I hope that is enough, given the previous sessions, to kind of help walk you through this first part of getting into Dawn's Hollow. There are some shops and things in the village. There's a mill with a water wheel down by the creek. There's some other, the brewery. There's locations here that we detail out to quite a degree, just in case your players should happen to go to them. But chances are your players haven't explored much, and these things are going to maybe come up in the course of the next day or two. But so, like, if they need to buy equipment or something, it's not like they can just walk to the shop and get it, because a panic is going to have set into this village. The village is going to have become trapped, the entire village, basically. The people are panicking. So in order to do things like buy gear or buy potions from the potion maker or the alchemist, your party is going to have to locate these people and beg them to open the shops, or make some special arrangement where they can be taken to the shops to get their things. So that's how that's going to play out now over the next couple of days here in the inn. I'm sure that there's like 50 things I've already forgotten to talk about. If so, I'm going to catch those at the beginning of the next session. Once again, I'm the Mad Hermit. I want to thank you for having hung out with me all this time, and I will see you in session 5 of this podcast for Night of the Sun, where we will cover day 2 inside the village of Dawn's Hollow. Be well, roll well.
Hey everyone, Ashiel here, and if you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/madhermitgames. In addition to our free walkthrough podcasts, we will be offering subscriptions which will include new dungeons, storylines, NPCs, as well as other exclusive content on a monthly basis. We look forward to hearing from you, so please consider joining our Discord channel, Mad Hermit Games, where you can connect with us, other DMs, and players. You can also email us at madhermitgames@mail.com, and all the links will be in the description. Thanks for listening.